Okay, I want to welcome everyone to the March National Heritage Areas Best Practice Call, focused on women's history and women in parks grants that have supported National Heritage Area projects. I do want to acknowledge the passing of Jim from Freedom's Frontier. Jim's face was always warmed my heart to see Jim's smiling face on these calls. And the best practice call format originated out of Freedom's Frontier, out of his shop with Julie McPike and Heather Wickens from Looking for Lincoln. So I do want to acknowledge Jim's loss, that he's very much in my thoughts today as we have this conversation about how to support National Heritage Areas. So I would like to introduce Karen Lee from the National Park Foundation, who's going to set the stage and share about the National Park Foundation's Women in Park grants. Thank you, Karen.
Hi, everybody. And before I get started, I would like to say that you have the National Park Foundation in the house today, and we are excited to be with you. I am a director in programs and partnerships. My colleague, Chaska Hansen, is my right-hand person. Many of you know her if you've been working through our grants process, and our boss, Tracy Ritchie, is also on the call. We just thought it was so important today to bring you all. The National Park Foundation would like to increase the work that we do with our heritage areas. A little later, I'm going to put a plug in for a couple of new projects that are on the horizon that I would like you all to look out for. But today, I'm particularly thrilled to be able to join your conversations about women's history and grants that some of you have received through the Women in Parks program. I thought it would be fun to sort of take a step back and remember where this little seedling, this tiny little seed of an idea, like one snowflake, where did it come from? It was the 19th Amendment. That feels like many years ago now, 2.5, 3 years ago. And we thought that it would be wonderful. And we heard the need from parks and park partners to be able to support projects in the telling of women's stories, because every single park, every heritage area, everything in the world has a women's story, past, present, and future, but we haven't necessarily stopped to take a closer look at what those stories are and how to bring them to life. And so this little idea was, could we do spark grants, tiny little grants, $30,000, not anymore. And we put out an RFP with the idea that that would just help get folks started doing research, bringing on interns, talking about women who were working in parks now, digging into the untold historic stories related to the areas that you all work in. And here's what happened. We received over $1.1 million worth of funding requests. We had only about $350,000 at the time to actually put out into the field. And we were just knocked over by the quality of the proposals, by the volume and the diversity of need across the whole entire Park Service, across many heritage areas. And the Park Service team that helped review those proposals said something they have never said to me before, and that is, do not throw one of these proposals away. There is nothing here out of the more than 100 proposals that you have received that is not worthy of funding. We just have the hard choice right now about which proposals are ready to go and we can afford to invest in right this minute, because we do not have $1.1 million of funding. We have 350. So if you are among those original grantees, that is a special thing in the merit of the projects that you proposed. And I'm thrilled to be able to hear from 2 grantees today. But let's catch up to the present. So what has happened? About 37 of those original proposals were funded, and it took it was a wildfire of energy and activity. And the Park Service created a 19th Amendment working group They structured meetings around conversations about how people could work together if they were interested in certain thematic areas. And since then, we've continued to fundraise here at the foundation and listen to you all. And what we're hearing is we're still going. And so what we've been able to do is fund a Women in Parks fellow who is a recent postdoc who's focusing on the Pacific West region in a 2-year fellowship. And we're also thrilled that we've most recently funded 17 interns, undergrad interns, who are supporting those projects that didn't get funded the first time around, but for whom the parks and the partners are still working on. So the work continues, and now it's super exciting because the 19th Amendment Working Group has transformed into the 250th Working Group. And there are so many people out there interested in leaning into 250th activities with a focus on women's history. And I would say that it is the strength of women's history and some of that earlier work that we all did together that has created one of the main thematic areas for the 250th celebration to be women and women's work and untold women's stories. And so, yeah, what we hope to do now is open up another in the next few months. It may take 6 months to finish the fundraising, but to be able to invest a larger amount of money, again, in targeted grants that will help you all do more work in this area. I will also put a plug in for something that's a related thematic area. You may have heard, you will if you haven't, that the National Park Foundation and the Park Service just secured a very large grant from the Mellon Foundation to continue the work that we're doing with Mellon Humanity Fellows. And you will see an RFP come out this early fall seeking proposals for parks and park partners to receive a recent postdoc fellow to do research and programmatic work in whatever thematic area it is that your aspect of humanities interacts with. So in terms of something that's coming up immediately, if you're interested in working with a fellow, you can collaborate with other parks, with other partners, create a consortia of interest around having a fellow, and that individual would work with you free of charge for 2 years on a project of your choice in the humanities. And I would love it if you want to talk about that further before this conversation is over. We can exchange contact information, or Katie can share it out with you in an email, but feel free to ping me about that or anything else we talk about today. And I think with that, I'll throw it back to Katie for the next part of the program.
Thank you so much, Karen. I really appreciate it. And we are very excited about the new funding coming in to study women's history. It's a wonderful investment. Beth, I would love to pass the baton to you for Cash La Poudre to share about your project. Take it away.
Sounds great. Thank you, guys. I'm gonna get ready to share my screen with you. 2 seconds here. Hold on. There we go. Okay, now I have to, perfect. Thank you, guys. I'm Beth Bullard. I'm with the Cash La Poudre River National Heritage Area. I actually have a background in healthcare and worked in healthcare for 30 years and decided to move in a different direction in 2018, and fortunately have been involved with the heritage area on many different aspects, and I've helped with events and I've done other things. And so now I have the pleasure of working in programs and education, and I'm having a great time. And I thank you for asking me to present on this, because I came in the end of the Lifting Voices from the Shadows program, so it gave me the opportunity to go back and learn so much more about what I didn't know happened before I was part of the project. So Lifting Voices from the Shadows gave us the opportunity to commemorate this, not only the centennial anniversary of the 19th Amendment, but it allowed us to amplify the voices of those actually left out of the suffrage movement, which is Indigenous women. Indigenous people did not get the right citizenship rights or the right to vote until 1924 when the Snyder Act was enacted. But then the Snyder Act was also given to the states to manage and deploy, and many of them did not even recognize it or do it. And I was doing some research. It wasn't even until 1962, it was the state of Utah was the last state to fully recognize voting rights for Indigenous people. So it's definitely been a story. It's been a lot of work for them, and it's something I think we need to continue to put a light on. The Northern Arapaho has deep roots for the Cache. For centuries, they lived in the Cache-la-Poudre River Basin. And in 1870s, it was the US military that forcibly removed them to Wyoming. So for us to tell the stories of this tribe and these people whose history and spiritual homeland is the Cache just made incredible sense. We were so fortunate to work with this tribe a few years ago, developing a video series called In Their Own Words, where it told the perspectives of Arapaho leaders and their descendants, and we were able to interview elders. So in that time, we learned about tribal customs, we learned about laws, we created relationships, which is a lot of what makes this program successful. And we saw that there were more people that wanted to talk. And so when it came to women's voices, it was just like a beautiful segue or continuation of the work we'd already done with the tribe. Yufna Soldier Wolf is a tribal liaison, and she was instrumental, boots on the ground in Wyoming for us. She traveled down here. She was able to communicate and teach us the things maybe we didn't know and show us how best to interact and form relationships. And she was even someone who tested our boundaries and gave us greater ideas and sort of expanded the project before it even began. We really wanted to look at multi-generational stories of the Arapaho women, some that paralleled the suffrage movement and some that didn't, and as well talk about what's going on in modern society today. The project started out initially saying, okay, we're going to go to Wind River, Wyoming, 2 trips. We're going to conduct 8 to 10 oral histories. From there, we're going to use the same companies that we used with the first series to edit educational videos and get footage. We were able to get some indigenous songs and things that Mark Soldier Wolf recorded that Yufna had on a tape, and she was thrilled to give it to us because she now knows that her father's music and songs will live in other places besides this tiny little cassette tape that she had. And with that footage, we wanted to launch it in social media campaigns. We wanted to create community lectures and platforms. We partnered with the Native American Cultural Center to say, what do you have going on with milestones with not only amendments, but the upcoming election or local rated events, and how do we get this information out to the community and share these stories? Well, this was 2020, right? So it was the spring of 2020. So all our initial proposals sort of had to shift a little bit, just like we all had to shift. We were not able to travel to the reservation. We were able to find a film crew in Wyoming that Yufna coordinated, and we did get 2 oral histories from her family members, Faye and Florida, which is great. And we were able to put those videos together. But the project shifted, like all things do, to online video and a lot of Zooming, which we're doing right now. But what happened in that, the beauty of it is it expanded beyond anything we initially intended. And we were able to have representation from over 7 different tribes and a lot of different voices. And we created 2 very over hour long webinars about civic engagement and voting barriers, in addition to some of the oral history content. So I think it actually made the conversation richer than we ever thought. And I think it made it better. So we looked at sort of a 6-month period leading up to our own actual election, and rightfully so, kicked off the digital content on June 2nd, which was a conversation between Yufna Soldier Wolf and our then now happily retired director, Kathleen Benedict. It sort of framed what was going to be happening, the things to come. And June 2nd is the actual anniversary of the Snyder Act, which I mentioned previous was the citizenship for Indigenous people. So we felt that that was important. We also highlighted other Indigenous milestones as well as suffrage milestones in our choices of dates that we rolled these out, as well as our own election time. The second one was a webinar about the barriers for the first Americans and the voting barriers going back historically, and also talking about modern day. The beauty of it, we were able to get a multi-generation of individuals on these calls, or these chats. It was some were in their 20s, 30s, 40s, up to their 80s. So you had a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different experiences, which I think made it richer. The two women I mentioned earlier, Faye Soldier Wolf and Florida Soldier Wolf, those were the histories that we did get from the Wind River, Wyoming. So we did post dates of those and shared those on social media. And then we wrapped up the digital content on October 27th with a webinar, getting out the vote and really talking about civic engagement and perspectives. Each one of these has its own little flavor. And because of that, we felt it necessary to do a compilation video. So after the final video was done, we went in and did about a 16-minute cut video that sort of gives you a sense of every one of these programs and projects, and maybe says, okay, I want to go back and watch this one, or I want this one, because it is a lot of content. So we wanted to steer people to what seemed to work for them and allow a lot of different platforms to be posted, because some are 3 minutes, some are 16 minutes, and some are even an hour. So not everybody wants to go in all those directions. In the invite to this meeting, I put a link. We created a playlist, and I put a link to all of this content if you're interested in seeing any of it. As well, you can go to the poudreheritage.org website, and all of our digital content is on there as well. So super excited about all that came from this project, unexpectedly in some ways. But the other thing I want to mention is when I go back and look at the views right now, the webinars are up to about at least 700 views and 9 or 10 shares. Most of the videos are in the multiple hundreds of views at this point. So we're going to watch and see where this gets traction and where it doesn't. The elder videos I had mentioned before that we taped years prior, when I went in and look at those are in the thousands of views by this point. So it's going to be interesting to track this digital content to see how it grows and expands as it's out there for the universe to enjoy and use. But back to my favorite part about this program is the people. We say a lot of the heritage areas, building relationships and connecting people to the land and people to each other and understandings. And I'm so proud of the partnerships that were formulated from this project. I listed all the different people, the agencies that came in, but what I'm really proud of is the pictures of all the women that you see there. And every one of them came and showed up, brought their voice, and it was beautiful to hear and to bring together. So I'm excited about the possibility of future. I'm excited about the possibility of more and where this project can go from here, because we now have all these wonderful relationships and partnerships who want to continue speaking out and continue to having their voices lifted. So thanks.
Thank you, Beth. That was great. It's always, I love these presentations. You get to learn so much. Andy, we'll pass the baton to you, and Andy from Erie Canalway will share about their project. Take it away,
Great,
Andy.
thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to turn my phone off. Sorry about that. So give me just a moment to share my screen. And I think I'm flip-flopped here, actually. Can you all see that?
Not yet, no.
Not yet, okay. As I said before, I'm a Teams
That's okay.
person, and so I tend to be a little offhanded with Zoom. Let me switch my screens up here and see if I can do it this way. There we go. Okay, are you seeing that now?
Yep.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And it still flipped it on me. You all get to see my notes. Let me try one more time, Katie. I'm sorry.
If that's okay, take your time.
Just FYI, I have not.
And if everyone else could remember to mute your phone.
me see here. I'm going to try it now. It still wants to do it. All right, let's do it the old-fashioned way.
We can't read your notes, so we'll just.
You can't read my notes?
Not
I
really.
bet you
Only
can now.
you have secrets in there.
I have all kinds of secrets in there.
Andy,
Yes, sir.
why don't you try at the top? It says display settings. There's a feature
Yep.
you can swap the presenter view and the slideshow view. Isn't this what you want?
You know, it's brilliant people that just bail you out every time, I tell you.
That's why this is called Best Practices and originated out of the Midwest region, because Brian in Motor City's helping everybody out. Thanks, Brian.
I've been there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Well, thank you. Which is funny that I had needed a little technical support here, because what I'm going to be talking about today is a project that was grounded in technology. We were really focused on the idea of integrating the Erie Canal theme into women's stories and the 19th Amendment and the canal history, et cetera. So we developed a video, a 26-minute video called Floating Ideas, How the Erie Canal Helped Shape America. And there were a couple of other videos that were developed as well, and some other products too. So I'm going to get into that. And what I'd like to talk about today is some of the development process, some of our goals and themes, and I'd like to talk about the symposium a little bit that came out of this, and talk about our partners and just how we figured this out. So let me flip to the next screen here. And before I get into that, just a little bit about who Erie Canalway is, because it's central to what I'm going to talk about. So we're really picking up on the women's history theme, but we are located in upstate New York. We were designated in 2000. And if you see the green shaded area on the map here, that's our corridor. So it's 524 linear miles with about 230 communities and a whole lot of people. And it's a very diverse canal. There's riverine sections of canal, there are channelized sections of canal, there are historic alignments. And it's interesting because the way that today's generation reacts to the canal is very specific to where they live within the system. Out in Western New York, people embrace the canal. They love the canal. It goes right through their community. In the Mohawk Valley, it's part of the Mohawk River, and people don't relate to it. They don't embrace it. So how we engage, how we think about stories, how we think about telling our story in communities really has a lot to do with our corridor and where we are here. The other thing is that it connects to the two Great Lake, or the two Finger Lakes, Seneca and Cayuga Lake, in the center of the state. They were canal construction areas at one time. The Oswego Canal, the Cayuga-Seneca Canal, which is right through here and connects to the Erie, the Champlain, which takes you up north towards Canada, and of course the Erie. And the two important pieces that are here for our discussions today are, of course, Rochester. Susan B. Anthony's home is there. Other important social justice residences and places are there. And Seneca Falls, which is a tiny little dot on the map down here on the Cayuga-Seneca Canal. So we have a wayside exhibit in Seneca Falls. This is one piece of it there to commemorate the canal's relationship there. So this started for us again, like Cash and others back in 2019, and Catherine Turton from the Northeast region, at the time the Northeast region, now DOI 1 today, of course, but Catherine at the time was the regional 19th Amendment coordinator. And Catherine had reached out to me and said, hey, you got this great resource, the great opportunity. You've got Women's Rights National Historical Park, all kinds of other folks up there. How do you feel about coming out to a workshop? And so I did, and went out to Auburn, actually, which is also a great spot for social justice questions and issues and themes, and spent time with about 100 people out there with Catherine, 100 community members from around the region, talking about what might come out of this. And came back to my office and talked with our folks, and I said, one of the things that's really important to me is the Erie Canal itself is taught in the school system at the 4th grade curriculum, and it's this glowing, lovely, opened America's West, infrastructure, manifest destiny, the whole thing. And the kids come walking away from it feeling like the canal was this soft, cushy, lovely thing, and it couldn't have been further from the truth. It was dirty. It was terrible conditions. There were issues with women's rights. There were issues with kids. There were all these other things that were happening. But it gave this opportunity for upstate New York to embrace the canal community. And so what they did is they wrapped their arms around it and they said, this is awesome. This is bringing in money. It's bringing in resources. The state is growing exponentially. And it created what was called the Burned Over District. And that allowed the women's rights story to blossom, and it allowed all these other opportunities to blossom, the Underground Railroad, all kinds of different things that came out of this. And so all of these partnerships that you see here kind of came out of this. And I talked with Catherine a little bit. I started making some phone calls and looking at funding sources and et cetera, and started to pull together a working committee. And we held some meetings, we did some talking, and boy, when you start to put all of that together, it becomes hard to disseminate it down. And that's where this group of partners was really important, because I want to start here. I am not a social justice historian. I'm not a historian by training. I'm not, women's rights is not my background, but it's really important for what we do and how we look at the National Heritage Corridor. So these people here were very, very important. So this working committee came up with a series of goals and tie-ins. And so a couple things here. We wanted to recognize that much of the women's rights movement was and is centered in upstate New York on the canal system, at least in the early get-going. And the fact is, it actually always had its roots there, and those roots stretched to Washington, D.C., they stretched to New York City, they stretched across the country, and they continue to have an impact today. One of the folks that you saw in the prior slide was First Amendment, First Vote. That's a really neat organization. It's a not-for-profit, and they work with about 100 11th and 12th grade girls in upstate New York, and they introduce them to the legislative process. And so what they do is they take them to workshops, they take them to legislative meetings, they take them to meet their U.S. senators over a year. And what happened here is we reached out to them and they said, awesome, as you're making this video, we'll give you talking heads. And boy, these girls can talk, and they are passionate. They were great. They really got to that today's generation goal. And we also wanted to look at the fact that there's lots of strong women today who are successful with careers, who have made a name for themselves, they're legislators, they're astronauts, they are glass blowers, they are canal boat captains, they are engineers on the New York State canal system, playing all of these different roles. But at the same time, we didn't want it to be this video that just glorified that. We wanted to not lose the fact that there's more to do. There's more work to do. So those were our goals and our tie-in and kind of our frame. And then that kind of got us into our themes and how we ratcheted down to something that was manageable. At this point, when we're talking about all those goals, this is work planning 101. We had the pie in the sky laid out, and I had a 5-hour video on my lap, and we had to get it down to 20 minutes. But we ended up with 26. But our themes then, came out of that. We didn't want to tell a history video. We didn't want to make this your standard, Ken Burns, for as great as Ken Burns videos are. That's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to focus on the success of today's women in the corridor. We wanted to inspire youth to vote. We wanted to empower youth. That was my daughter in the red dress in the prior slide. There's some personal passion here for me. We wanted to make sure that people knew it wasn't just about white women, that there's an Asian women's story here, that there's an African American story, there's an African American's men right to vote story. There's all of these things that were colliding throughout this process that impacted, and a lot of that was taking place up here in upstate New York, and that story's not really been highlighted. And we wanted to note that we weren't done, as I said a moment ago. You know, the Equal Rights Amendment still has work to do, et cetera. So we ended up with kind of retrenching a little bit. And this is where Karen Lee comes in because Karen had this fabulous grant program, Women in Parks. And I was on one of the Women's in Parks chat session workshops, and Karen was talking it up, and I thought, oh man, that's just spot on. And so Karen and I talked a little bit, and we were able to be funded. And what we ended up doing was completing our original idea, which was a 5-minute video, which turned into a 10-minute video. And in that particular case, we focused on youth. We focused on the 4th and 6th grade curriculums, and we crossed the curriculum between the social studies curriculum that centers on the canal and canal history and the women's history. And we developed this short video. We developed a multi-page curriculum guide that provides clear guidance on how to cross those curriculums that goes with that. And then this was all being produced by WCNY, and which is a PBS affiliate here in upstate New York. And they were able to get all of this uploaded onto PBS Learning Media for it, which if you haven't checked it out, PBS Learning Media is an awesome tool. There's all kinds of good stuff there. And then the piece that Karen's grant really focused on then was the floating ideas, and that's the 26-minute video. It's more of an adult focus, and it gives us an opportunity to spread these resources out across our website to cross promote them in different ways. So the youth pieces obviously are on our learning pages. The floating ideas piece is on our social media pages on our website. And then we use them in different ways. So it really has become an awesome product for us to be able to share what we've done and to help tell a new story in a new way about the canal. So then once we were close to finished, and this is going on a couple of years now, and I'll get to that issue in a moment here on the next slide. But again, speaking with Karen and getting some inspiration from the foundation, we talked about doing a symposium on this, and how could we share this even more broadly. Once the video was completed, I should note that PBS did share it several times. It on its first airing, it reached, I think, almost 8,000 households. So who knows how many people. And it's reached several thousand people on our YouTube page now. So it's being viewed. But how can we take another step here and have a little bit more of an academic process to this? So we developed a symposium, and again, this is August of 2021, in the middle of the pandemic, and so we went back to WCNY again and said, can you help us with a symposium? How can we do this and not just tell it in upstate New York, but make it available across the National Park Service, make it available across the PBS viewing networks, etc. And they said, great. And we did pay for it. There were some costs involved that, again, the foundation helped us with. But what we ended up doing was developing an 1.5-hour symposium with 5 panelists. We presented the floating ideas video in the adult version. And then we also had a presentation by Women's Rights National Historical Park, etc. Our moderator was Ella Wagner, who is the 250th Centennial Fellow with the Park Service. Unfortunately, she had a family issue at the last minute, but she had awesome questions and great notes, and I was able to come in and fill the gap for her. But she would have been speaking with our panelists who represented the National Women's Hall of Fame, Debbie Stack, who was our WCNY production person, Paul Stewart from the Underground Railroad Education Center, and Judy Wellman from the Historical New York. Many of you may know her. She's a very well-known researcher in women's rights and social justice. And then also we had the new director of the National Women's Hall of Fame, which is in Seneca Falls. And that is their new home right there. That's the Cayuga Canal that you're looking at. That building is the Seneca Knitting Mill, which did employ women throughout its tenure, as well as freed African Americans. And one of the neat things about them was that they did not like the idea of slavery, and they would not use Southern cotton. So they focused solely on wool production up here in New York, and that's a very well documented story that the National Women's Hall of Fame loves to tell. And the Women's Rights National Historical Park is just outside the picture plane on the side of the canal where the woman is, directly behind the back of the photographer. So great folks involved in this up to this point. And then of course there was that virus. We don't need to get into that, but we had a very patient foundation through this. And the two impacts that really hit us from the virus was, one, WCNY was able to keep airing, but all of their production shut down completely because what they were asked to do was work directly with the Syracuse City School District. So they put all of their production energy into streaming online classes for youth, and Debbie Stack, who I mentioned a moment ago, is their education director. And so she got subsumed by that. And so we had to table this project. And that was okay because they also weren't allowed to do interviews, either in studio or travel to do interviews. So we were really curtailed on production. And I had a couple of conversations with Karen about this, and it delayed us about a year. And so thanks to Karen for her willingness to keep this project moving and focused and forward. And finally, just thank you. I think we've achieved a lot of what we wanted to do. We've had a ton of viewings. We've definitely increased our audience. We've got curriculum materials out there that are unique to telling the canal story. And we've certainly seen an uptick in our audience through a lot of our outreach and marketing here. So thank you very much, Katie. Thank you, Heather. Thank you for putting this together. And again, Karen, Catherine Turton, and others, thank you for your support.
Thank you, Andy. That was excellent. Do we have any questions for any of our panelists about how to apply for the grant or lessons learned from the work that they did? I can't see everyone, so if you want to shout out, because I can't see any hands raised. Well, I have a question for Karen first. How much money is available going forward? You mentioned the fellowships, but how much money is coming from the Park Foundation for new grants?
We hope to be able to issue an RFP in 5 or 6 or 7 months that will fully grant $1 million total. We may still keep the format in these sort of smaller targeted grants. We're discussing that now. I think it depends on how many projects we receive. I mean, last time we were so overwhelmed with over 100 requests, but yeah, based on the strength of the first RFP, we just realized that there's so much more need and interest and desire to dig into this work, and that we couldn't just go back out again with $350,000 because we would be in the same situation that we were the last time, unable to fill 2/3 of the requests. So we are doggedly trying to finish that fundraising now so that we can get an RFP out over, well, certainly within the calendar year, but hopefully sooner. I also wanted to put a plug in for another program. Andy jogged my memory. He mentioned 4th grade curriculum, and you might not have all picked up on that, but if you do develop school curricula and you are working with 4th graders in particular, the RFP for the 4th grade field trip program, which we call Open Outdoors for Kids, will be open in June. And on the National Park Foundation website, there will be a link that you can access to submit your grant request for curriculum development and engaging 4th graders in particular. You can engage 4th graders online through live or virtual programming. You can engage them on site or some combination of both. So that is another that program has been around for quite a while. We consider it a flagship. We're heavily invested in that because we realize that these products that everybody is creating also have a home and an audience in public schools. And you may not have gone into this work thinking that that was your target audience, but if you would like to further disseminate some of the content that you have created through this first Women's History Grant and get it out into schools, especially fourth grade, that would be one way that there is funding available to do that. And Brian, I want to say hello because we don't know each other, but you are a fourth. I recognize your name. We've never met, but you do get the fourth grade field trip grant. And I wanted to thank you for working in that area because, fourth grade isn't everybody's bag and not, maybe parks and partners want to work with sixth grade or eighth grade or younger kids. But Brian is one of the fourth grade Open Outdoors for Kids grant recipients. And it's really a pleasure to meet you.
Absolutely. It's been excellent. The entire experience of working with the team there. And Shaska and I have been in email communication, I know, and get the contracts worked out and all that fun stuff. But yeah, when it comes down to it, being able to, be the practitioner of this and deliver it and make the connection between national parks and especially our urban landscape here in Michigan, I think is critically important for them to be able to see the park connection here. And it's been taken to very well. I can reflect on Andy's comments and that you all have been very patient with obviously what we dealt with in 2020 and our ability to pivot and readjust things. And so now we're able to deliver content on even higher level to even broader group of people. So I can highly recommend to anyone on the call, if you're interested in any of these Park Foundation grants, they're a great team to work with and very supportive. Commercial over.
I love it. I was thinking, hey, that's another topic for best.
Record that, huh?
You'll be back, Karen and Brian.
Hey, Katie, I had a quick follow-up if you don't mind.
Yeah, please, Andy.
Yeah, Karen, you've mentioned, I think 2 or 3 times now, these little tiny grants. And I just wanted to note that, we received, about $25,000 from you guys to do this project. And that for us, that's not little tiny. That really made a huge difference. And we were able to leverage Canal Corporation funding to broaden the pool so that we could do more work with this. And also WCNY saw a lot of value in this. And they underwrote quite a bit of what we did because of the vision. So, a little bit goes a long way, and it builds a lot of good feeling and connections across the partnerships when we build these projects. And when people hear, oh, we've got funding from the National Park Service, National Park Foundation, that goes a long way. So I hear you saying little, but they're great to grit. They generate a lot of excitement. So thank you.
Pleasure. Hey, I have a question for everybody. I'm embarrassed to admit, but this is my chance to learn. How many heritage areas are there? I mean, and is that the main designation in your connective tissue, is that you all are heritage areas, or is there another bucket of similar group, but that call themselves something slightly different than a heritage? Everybody, your heritage area. How many are there?
So there are 55, 53 who actively receive funding from the Park Service, and the entrance funding, if you will, is about $150,000 a year for those working on management plans. So they have to match those dollars. So getting a $25,000 grant and you're, to match 150, that's really getting you somewhere. And often our heritage areas do granting themselves, and some, $5,000 grants they give to communities or schools or programs. So I echo what Andy said about every little bit makes a difference in communities. And anyone want to say anything about being a National Heritage Area to Karen's question, or I could go on all day about the heritage areas. But many also have scenic byway designations within their heritage areas. Some have parks and trails. Many work with state parks. But the heritage area is that connective tissue. It is, to Andy's map, that's 524 miles across New York State. That's a big area and designation to be a National Heritage Area. Of course, there's other, and it really helps bring people together from different counties or different, oftentimes even different states. We have multiple areas in. They're often very big, and then we have some really small ones. But I'll do a whole presentation on heritage.
I would just add, hello, everybody. This is Sean Palmaville-Size from Motor City's National Heritage Area. And I would simply add that the unique thing I find about heritage areas is their partnership approach. It's all collaboration, almost all collaboration. And it's built up around outreach that happens during the master planning period to the community. And they are designated by Congress. And so they have to be about a theme that is important to national history, to the national story. So it will also consist of a grouping of all kinds of different assets that deal with that theme. So for example, ours in the Detroit area, headquartered in Detroit, but going throughout Southeast and Central Michigan, is about the impact of the auto on society and that particular industry. And it does include, as Katie mentioned, natural resources and how important those were to the beginning of the industry, what happened to those natural resources as a result of the industry, and it's a living industry moving forward. So I would say that they are, a really great tool, heritage development, and that sort of a vision of the future for improving your community based on heritage development and making that more of a norm than it typically is. So it's not an easy concept. It's really, there's a lot to it. And every time you get into it, you find more and more and more things. When we first began, we had 1,000 heritage assets that we cataloged that had something to do, either auto factories or mansions or, cultural things such as libraries and archives and the story of the United Auto Workers, all the way to, things that are changing now. So it's very interesting, and it's a way to define the American landscape and preserve that culture.
Can anybody on this call envision you either working individually or as a collaborative with other heritage areas with a postdoc for 2 years that, the idea is you write a proposal and figure out how you would share that resource over 2 years if you were going to go in with a park or some other partners. But I guess you've got me thinking now, Sean, like all the untold stories across a very wide geography of whatever the heritage area sort of corridor is. And Beth spoke so compellingly about the project that they did with their Women's History Grant to begin with. But I just would love to kind of brainstorm a little bit more with you all, or throw stuff out and see what stuck to the wall, in hopes that a few of you would put proposals in, either together as a collaborative or individually, when this RFP does come out for the Mellon Humanities Fellows. It just might be a great resource to get additional research done. And the fellows don't just research and write papers and stick them in a file and you never see them again. The whole point is that they work with interp units, and there is some funding that is structured as part of that, that process that the fellow would have access to, so that they can create story maps, digital assets, assist with interpretive planning, assist with training of staff that are going to be public facing, forward facing, or internal facing. And I get that it's a little different because your organizational structures are a little different, but collaboration with interp and ed, the Park Service is a big piece of the way we're thinking about the team that supports the work of the fellows, and then where do the products live and how do you get this content out to the public. and to your staff and your colleagues and other members of your particular heritage area, internal and external community. So if anybody wants to set up a further conversation about that, is it okay, Katie, you send our email addresses?
I definitely will. Yeah, Karen, that is great. I didn't realize that heritage areas themselves would be available for the Mellon Fellows. I did think they were going to be park-based. If they have to be park-based, maybe that's an opportunity for collaboration with park units like Motor Cities. Like I can see a great story with kind of the Rosie the Riveter time period of the women working in the more broadly auto industry. They were making things for the war effort. But, you know, I think that would be great if heritage areas can tap into this. So
we're learning. I mean, the whole point about scaling up from the 3 fellows that were originally there, a civil rights historian, a gender and sexuality historian, and a labor historian. And then we added a monuments and memory historian. But what we learned from that pilot project over 3 years was we didn't even scratch the surface, and they were very isolated to a park, to a particular team. It seems to work better if they can work regionally, if they can work across a larger scope of people and space and ideas and needs, because we're bringing these people on board, not we, but yeah, the Park Service, to get real work out of them, real product creation, and yeah, and into the weeds of it, I'm not exactly sure, like, does a superintendent need to sign the application to say, yes, we are a collaborating partner with a park or whatever? We're still figuring those details out. I just know that the history and cultural program, you know, based here in DC, wants to expand, and Reggie Chappell's shop, the partnership shop, wants to expand and include heritage areas. So at every turn, heritage areas have been mentioned in this conversation of expansion. And so we will find ways to do that.
great. Well, that's exciting. And Barbara Little works in cultural resources as I do. So I can certainly.
She's the person to talk.
Yeah. She did not tell me we were eligible. So I'm like, oh.
Yeah, well, we'll all circle back. We literally just heard that we got the grant last week. It's all been out. She's back in the office now, but I think actually even when we got the news, she was not at her desk. So we have not had the chance to talk with her since getting confirmation that the grant has been issued.
Well, I think this is exciting. It's like breaking news. We'll figure it out.
It is breaking news.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments? I thought I heard a voice.
Well, that's Andy. I was just going to kind of make a suggestion or throw a thought out in terms of these fellowship grants. A lot of heritage areas abut each other. There's not a lot of major overlap. But Erie Canalway in particular, we have an overlap with Hudson River National Heritage Area here in the Capital Region. And, you know, you're talking about, you know, interlinking these things, and I'm thinking about what can I connect that's large and regional. And the state has just opened up what they call the Empire State Trail, which is 350 miles of the Erie Canalway Trail, which is completely off-road. It's unimpeded from Buffalo to Albany, and then they opened up a section down to New York City through the Hudson River National Heritage Area. And there's a piece of the state agency that oversees that is housed at the Hudson River National Heritage Area in Albany. And it would be interesting to, you know, to develop some sort of a program around those two pieces to create an interpretive package or some kind of and work with the state on some of their interpretive pieces. That's what they're looking for right now. So tapping into some of these ongoing activities that are already happening, where, you know, some support from the Park Foundation adds leverage to what's already taking place, would be, that's, you know, just, I'm thinking off the top of my head, but that's one of the ways that that's sort of what popped in my head, was trying to try to capture some of these larger ongoing pieces that that overlap boundaries. And then the other piece of that, of course, is that you've got multiple national park units within each of those heritage areas. And so you could potentially do this through the regional meetings. We have an upstate group of superintendents who meets, and our director meets with them. And so maybe that's your group that you target, is those regional superintendent meetings that might provide a platform to link in both the parks and the heritage areas.
Hey, Kate and Karen, this is Beth. I totally agree with that. And, you know, we have 3 heritage areas in Colorado, and we have partnered together to do different types of programs. And so I do think that's a dynamic and a wonderful idea. And then I would challenge us to just think out of the box. And how do our heritage areas or different heritage areas throughout the country align, or historically or in another perspective? And is there a way that you partner with someone that may not be as geographically right next to you, but has a similar story, or a story that threads that comes together? So it sounds exciting, and I would be way open to just having the conversations and seeing what could happen.
Yep.
One thing you got me thinking about, Beth, is, for example, the Rochambeau Trail and the whole, 250th. Well, they got a 4th grade field trip grant off of the theme of unfinished revolution, and who wasn't at the table during the revolution, and why are they at the table now? And that's connecting, like whatever, the 1,000 miles of the Rochambeau Trail and all the states, because then they want to do on trail interpretation and some other stuff. But it's like, if the Rochambeau Trail from American Revolution can figure out a way to contemporize, and I mean, it's not that hard. What you just said is exactly being out of the box. But yeah, I sort of thought this is a very interesting thing to watch and to figure out how we can support. So thanks. Let's talk more.
There is an organization, Karen, this is Sean again. There's an organization called the Alliance of National Heritage Areas, which nearly all the heritage areas belong to, which has explored this idea in the past through their educational committees, and looked at how we can work together, or just as you outlined a minute ago, those with similar themes, those that are near one another, those without, that aren't near one another. There is an example of a pollinator preservation program going on with several national heritage areas. I don't even know how many now, but the Midwest region National Park Service started that out, and groups have voluntarily participated in it for a couple of years, because of quite a lot of them have large open landscapes that lend themselves to pollinator preservation story in one way or the other. And it's sort of an ironic theme for even Motor Cities participated in that, because so here we are, an industrial story for the most part. And yet we found within our partners a great embrace of this, including the Ford Motor Company that plants pollinator flowers out on the freeway and attracts pollinators every year. So you find a lot of that kind of thing going on. I'd say that's probably a very successful example of that across national heritage areas. But it's a great idea, and there are probably a lot more possibilities that could be embraced for that. But this organization may be a good place to funnel through this idea that you're talking about. Can national heritage areas come together on the use of an application for a researcher? Which program was this, Karen, that NPF was doing?
It's the Mellon Humanities Fellowship Program.
Okay, great, thank you.
Well, and we could continue this conversation, and I look forward to having more dialogue with the National Park Foundation and your support for national heritage areas, and this potential new opportunity with the Mellon Fellows program. But the Women's in Parks grants have been great, and we look forward to highlighting history more than 1 month out of the year, and at all of our sites. So I want to thank the National Park Foundation, Karen and your team, and Beth from Poudre, and Andy Kitzman from Erie Canalway for your presentations today. Thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again on our next best practice call. Thanks, everybody.